good morning, or good afternoon. Today, you're listening to Entrepreneurs After Hours, and we're interviewing Mike Conrad. He wrote a book, he started some businesses. Let's talk to him. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm well, Malaya. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, and I'm glad to hear that you're well. Also glad that you're on our show today.
I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for coming on the show, Mike.
Oh, you're welcome, Mac. It's good to meet you both.
Appreciate it.
Same
Malia, do
here.
you want to start with the first question?
Yes, Mike, how did you get here? What got you started?
I lost a bet. No, that's almost like that. I have been in the tech industry, the electronics manufacturing industry, for 40 years. 1985, I got in. I was recruited as child labor. And uh, during my time at my former employer, I saw a need for a certain type of technology that would be used in the manufacturing space. It was to address some government regulation that was going to ruin our day. There was a certain chemical that was used as part of the manufacturing process that was becoming banned around the world, and I thought, here's an opening to create a different type of technology, a different machine that would not use that soon to be banned chemical. And I pitched the idea to my boss, and he said no. And I appealed and appealed and appealed, and he kept saying no. So finally, I sweetened the pot. I said, "Look, I'll design the equipment on my time, my money, my risk, and then I'll just bring you a completed machine and see what you think." Okay, that one he liked. So I did that, and 6 months, 8 months later, brought him a completed machine, and at that time the company was not doing financially very well at all. In fact, it was threatening to go out of business, and we had a major trade show, the largest trade show in our industry in North America was coming up in a few weeks. So I just said, let's throw caution to the wind. Let's stick the company label on the machine and stick it in the booth and see what happens. And we did, and we sold, I think, 5 of them right off the floor. And that became a problem because I was building them in my garage and my friend's garage at night and weekends and selling them by day, and then selling them to my employer, and they would resell them to the customer. And it turned out I'm a much better salesman and designer than I am a builder. And I hated that. And I had no skill with that. And I couldn't keep up. So I went to my boss and sold him the rights to the machine for basically my out of pocket. I didn't make any money on it, but I figured that if the company does well, I'll do well. Everything's supposed to roll downhill, which is a fallacy, but that was my thinking at the time. And then I had these delusions of grandeur. I thought, okay, I saved the company. And we were having a product development meeting to discuss the next generation of products that we were going to develop. And I thought, exaggerated expectations, I thought I would be carried in on a chariot and fanned with grape leaves during my pitch. Because, of course, they'll say yes to me. I was right the first time. So I gave them the next gen version of my machine, which would be exceptionally environmentally friendly. And he wasn't interested. And there was another pitch made by a fellow employee, which I, in my head anyway, classified as a stupid idea, but that was through my filter. And he said he was going to go with the stupid idea. And then I said to him, "I think you're making a mistake." And then he said one word that started my company. It began with F. It had 4 letters. No, it's not that word. I said, "I think you're making a mistake." And he said, "Fine." And that fine was an F-bomb for me. It was a dismissive, I don't care what you think, you have no respect, you have no clout. Anything you did in the past didn't matter. It was just fine. I don't care. So at that very moment, that very millisecond in my head, I started the company. And I went home, complained to my wife how unfair life was. And she says, "Is it a good idea?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think it's a great idea." And she says, "Then why are you trying to give it away to someone else? Why don't you just do it yourself?" And then the light bulb moment, I'm like, "Really?" And so I had spent another 6 or 8 months as a mad scientist, converted my garage to a mad scientist studio, and created the next gen machine. And then once I got it near completion, I gave my notice and left, and was fully upfront with my intention, and had them sign a document saying, I'm willing to stay for 2 weeks or longer if you like. I'm willing to walk out the door right now. I may be a competitor in the future. So I just want that to be disclosed. And he asked me to stay for a month, which I did. And then I started the company. Literally, my last day, I went home, signed a lease on a very small, very modest business unit in a multi-tenant business park, and began that journey. And then 3 months later, he sued me. And 100% of my startup capital, that I borrowed from family and friends and bank accounts and credit card advances and everything like that, almost immediately evaporated because it all went to pay the attorneys. So that was how I got into the business. I refer to myself as a reluctant entrepreneur because no part of me was interested in starting a business. I'm just a very techie kind of guy, and I'm a very conceptual guy. I come up with ideas. I've invented everything on the planet, at least in my head. And I haven't actually done anything about it, but I've thought about it, right? And this one I did something about. And the only way to get this product to see the light of day was to do it myself. No one else would do it. So that's the kind of the reluctant journey that I went on to start a business and become an entrepreneur.
I like that title, The Reluctant Entrepreneur. Sounds really fun.
Yeah, it describes to a T, my journey. And it turns out the more business founders that I've spoken with, I'd say probably a little over half would also classify themselves as a reluctant entrepreneur. They didn't just grow up, yearning to own a business. That was not front of mind. It was happenstance. They either got fired from a job or something, and they ended up just, through lack of any other option, starting their own business. And that is more common than I would have originally have thought.
Yeah, that is interesting. I feel like, at least in my generation, a lot of people are talking about how we want to be an entrepreneur. Do you think it's maybe a generational issue where your generation was more pushed into being an entrepreneur because of outside factors versus now people want to do it because they've seen your generation, Mike, do so well for yourselves?
Well, I think, yeah, there are definitely generational differences. I don't think any generation is better or worse than any other generation, but there are differences, and we tend to judge the differences because we don't understand them, so we judge them harshly. I think what it is mostly, though, Mac, is, have you ever seen these memes? This is what my parents think I do. This is what my friends think I do. This is what the government thinks I do. This is what I really do. Uh,
Yeah.
that's owning a business. I can't tell you how many times I've been approached by friends and relatives and strangers that I sit to next on the plane, and they say something like, "You're so lucky you own your own business. You can be your own boss. You can come and go as you want. You can just write yourself a check. You can take vacations and write everything off." And in theory, that's probably true. In reality, it's not practical. It's not possible, because I could write a check, but there has to be money. I could take time off, but I can't afford it because I need to run the business. And instead of being your own boss, you're now beholden to all your bosses. Your bosses are your customers, your vendors, your employees, the government, the IRS, regulations, economies, all these things, pandemics. We report to all of those things, and the idea that we're our own boss, while technically is true, doesn't come out for many years in terms of practical benefit.
Yeah, I
Yes.
feel that. I know when I started my first business, in my mind, it was just going to be clear, smooth sailing. As soon as I started, that was where my mind thought it was going to be. Turns out, running a business is probably the most stressful thing I've ever done. It sounds like that's been the case for you too,
Oh,
especially
absolutely.
with your
Absolutely.
startup
And
story.
yeah, and it didn't help that I had it helped that I had a good technical acumen. It did not help that I knew nothing about business. In fact, the things I knew about business were all wrong. That's worse than knowing nothing. So I made every mistake any business person can possibly make, sometimes more than once, and it turned out that the skills that I brought, and I say skills in air quotes, the skills that I brought to the table, maybe attributes is a better description, that I brought to the table when I started the company were ego, naivety, arrogance, tons of passion, and a very poor assessment of risk. That's what I had in my toolbox when I started the business. And I'm thankful for that, because without that, I was too stupid to know I could fail, right? I was too naive to know 80% statistically, according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, 80% of all business startups ultimately fail. Only 20% make it past 15 years. And I'm glad I didn't know that. Naivety is great. Ignorance is bliss. I'm glad that I had, what I'll say, piss and vinegar, just a fire in my belly and just passion, nothing. Don't confuse me with facts. I can do this. And I needed that, because the first year and the first couple years really are so hard. And, it's like playing a video game starting at level 10 with one life left. That's what it feels like. You're just escaping trapdoors and monsters and, zombies and all these business versions of those that are trying to kill you at every second. So I'm grateful for that. I'm also grateful that over time I realized that I needed to shift those skills. I needed to take my best friend, my confidant, my bodyguard, my ego, and say, okay, little buddy, time to go in the dungeon, lock you away. Because I was making a lot of ego-based decisions, and I was making a bunch of fear-based decisions, and I was just reacting. I was just like a fireman chasing an arsonist. I was just putting out every fire that was started. Only I was the arsonist as well, So I was creating my own fires and spending all my time putting them out. And then what I learned is that the skills or the attributes that get you from A to B will doom your business from B to C, guaranteed. And one either has to acquire new skills appropriate for the scale of the business or hire. You can acquire it by learning, you can acquire it by hiring. So a little bit of both. I did a little bit of both. I learned new skills quite the hard way, and I hired new skills. And that takes a bruise to the ego, because I used to think I was the smartest person in the room. And now my goal is to be the stupidest person in the room, because I consider myself pretty bright. And if I can surround myself by people smarter than me and more experienced in certain matters than I am, I can't fail.
So let's talk about the differences between the skills from the A to B to the B to C. How do those skills hurt you when you're trying to go from B to C, but are necessary for the A to B? And what skills did you have to develop to be able to get to point C?
The skills I started with, as I mentioned, ego, bravado, arrogance, naivety, all that, passion, were good, because they masked a lot of the perceived risks of business. What I did not know how to do at the time was to read a financial statement. I was grossly misinformed. I just looked at two numbers: revenue and net profit. And that was it. I didn't look at cash flow projections. I didn't look at balance sheets. I didn't look at anything to do with that. And I thought the solution to every problem was growth. Well, it's really hard at this level, so I'm going to raise it to this level because it'll be easier. And it isn't. Rapid growth, and I was one heck of a salesman. I had passion. It was my business. It was my product. I designed it. So I was good at selling it, which was a problem. In fact, we used to have a saying in our company: we have good news and bad news. The good news is we got another order. The bad news is we got another order. And the more I tried to grow myself out of problems, the problems grew exponentially faster than the revenue. And I had to learn the difference between growth and scale. Scaling is different. Rapid growth is a luxury most small businesses cannot afford. Because if you really want to grow properly and scale, if I wanted to go from one machine a month to 2 machines a month, I had to buy more inventory. I had to get more space. I might have more people. I have to, it cost me more to invest before I see the benefit of those extra sales. But I didn't understand that. I just thought sales, sell, and just bring in money. And if we pay payroll every week, and there were times when my bookkeeper would go, Mike, we don't have enough to cover payroll next week. We need some down payments. So I'd make deals. I would bring in money. I was good at that. Wouldn't be profitable though. But that wasn't my problem today. My problem today is cover payroll tomorrow. The profit part, I'll deal with that next month when I look at the income statement. So what I had to learn was responsible growth, scale. I had to learn how to read financials, and I had to learn to read beyond the financials. I also had to learn that not every sale is a good sale. We were selling to anyone willing to pay us, and we attracted through our advertising methods, which were obnoxious, braggadocious, tacky. We're the best, they all suck. Basically ads like that. We attracted customers that thought that was cool. And turned out we attracted quite a bit of toxic customers, which were very needy, which would abuse their equipment, that would demand free things all the time. And we were too afraid to say no because we didn't want to get a bad rap. So eventually what I had to learn, some of the new skills I learned over the years, was to change who our target customer is and who do we want that customer to be and how do we want to describe that customer. Almost like a dating app. We had to start being very selective of who we want to sell to. And that first change was made through our marketing efforts. And we can talk about, I think we're going to talk about marketing at some point, so I won't jump ahead, but that was one of the skills I had to develop. And I had to keep looking ahead and realizing that growth comes when growth comes. Growth, revenue, cash flow, profit are not the result of chasing growth, revenue, cash flow, or profit. They're the results of good decisions. So I had to stop zooming in on one part of the company. I had to make these holistic, basic good decisions and then let the profit and the cash flow and all that flow as it would organically, rather than trying to force any one of those. Because anytime I tried to force one of those, it was at the expense of another. And I was just playing whack-a-mole with the problems.
Okay. So in your business, do you feel like in the beginning it was right to be taking every order you could get and chasing every customer? Do you think if you were to start all the way over from ground zero, do you think at the beginning that's necessary to still take every order you can get and chase the profit and revenue? Or would you come back with a different approach if you were to start from ground zero again?
Well, in my case, I wouldn't change anything because those were change agents. Those were that was curriculum for my, basically my PhD level business course that I don't remember signing up for. That was my college experience. And so I'm grateful for all those mistakes I made because they reinforced the importance of an alternate way to do business. I would not have come up with that on my own if I did not, if I didn't put my hand in the fire, I would continue to do foolish things. So sometimes you just have to put your hand in the fire and feel the burn and then never want to feel that again. And then look for alternate ways to do what you want to do. So I I think for me, I'm grateful for every mistake I made, as costly and painful as it was. Um, and when you first start your business, while ultimately you want to seek the right type of customer, ultimately you want to do deals that are win-win for everybody, win for the customer, win for you. Well, every deal should be profitable. You should never lose money on something. I realized that in the earliest days, the only way to last one more day was to make another deal with the devil. And so one does what they need to do. I would never judge anyone for that. You do what you need to do, even if you know that's not the way you want to continue building your business. Sometimes there's just no other workaround. So, if you're bootstrapping your company, or if you're looking for seed rounds, if you're doing, getting family investors, or whatever method of raising capital you have, you do what you need to do. And I wouldn't judge anyone for that, as I said. And I did what I needed to do, and it got me to where I am today. So I wouldn't suggest any different. I would just plant the seed that will not be sustainable. So if you need to do stuff like that, just to, take starter fluid down the carburetor, for your motorhead audience out there that knows what that means, it's super high octane. You can't run on it, but you can get started on it. And you kind of got to do what you got to do. Everyone talks about work-life balance as an example. There is no work-life balance when you first start a business. It's all business. There's no life part of it. And Malaya, I see this going on. I see you shaking your head. And it's required pretty much to start your business, and it will be guaranteed to lead your business to failure if that's not remedied at some point. But I'm not naive enough to think that you can start off with all best practices and still survive. It's just do what you got to do, knowing it's temporary.
So how then do you switch from taking every sale you possibly get to picking your target customers and only catering to the groups or buyers that you actually want to be selling to? How did that switch happen for you, and how do you think that other people can make that switch in their businesses as well?
Well, it happened, I talk a lot when I host a podcast on business. I talk a lot about the business gods, and I don't mean that spiritually. I mean that more metaphorically. The business gods are out there watching out after you and teaching you lessons and hitting you over the head. And I've kept the business gods busy because they've had to hit me over the head multiple times before it finally sunk in. When we were doing our braggadocious, obnoxious advertising marketing campaigns, we were doing trade shows at the time, lots of trade shows, about 12 trade shows a year. And most of our marketing budget went into trade shows and advertising, which was, again, obnoxious. And we had a whole bunch of equipment in the booth. The equipment was all on wheels so that we can save on union labor, and we didn't need a forklift to move them in. We could wheel them in. And I rented a 30-foot wide, 16-foot tall waterfall. But instead of dropping sheets of water, it had thousands of little nozzles at the top, which dropped controlled releases of water droplets, much like an inkjet printer would put ink on a paper. And so images and words fell from the sky. It was really cool. And I think I spent about $50,000 to $70,000 to rent it, and for 3 days for the show. And I was so proud of that. But every year we were trying to top ourselves. We were doing, we were carnival barkers, high-tech carnies. We put magicians in the booth. We put video games in the booth, surfboards one time in the booth. This time it was a waterfall. And a guy came up to me just before the show opened, and he had a camera, and he said, "This is the coolest booth I've ever seen. Do you mind if I take a picture of it?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And we're off to a good start. And then he noticed my equipment was on wheels, and he said, "Would you mind rolling your equipment out of the way so I can get a better picture of the waterfall?" And that was the mallet over the head from the business gods. Like, "Mike, what the heck are you doing? We don't sell waterfalls. This is just shtick. And, we're Ringling Brothers." And it just hit me that this is stupid. We're spending all this crazy money in advertising, barely making any money at the end of the day because we were sinking it all into this obnoxious advertising, attracting customers that demanded discounts and free things all the time and didn't maintain their equipment, cost us a fortune for warranty repairs. And at that moment, I said, okay, we're done. And met with my team and they agreed. I said, we're done with this. At that moment, that was about 12 years ago. And we have not, I think we've done 2 trade shows in the last 12 years, and we used to do 12 a year. And we stopped advertising. No more print ads, no more digital ads, nothing. We haven't run an ad in 12 years. So the next question would be, well, what did you do instead? We switched over to something I've coined as conscious marketing. We decided that from now on, if we're going to talk to our industry, we're going to add value. It's going to be value-based discussions. So we started a webinar series many, many years ago called Tech Tuesday, once a month. And we talk about best practices within our specific space. We don't even talk about our company. We don't even show a picture of our equipment. I started a podcast on the subject of reliability within the electronics industry, where I interview subject matter experts. Never discuss my business, other than in the intro. I'm founder of whatever company. That's it. I started, instead of exhibiting at trade shows, I was upstairs in the technical conference, started speaking regularly at conferences. I travel around the world now speaking about best practices and reliability. And again, don't talk about my company or my other than in the introduction. My company's not relevant. And what that ended up doing was to build authority and trust in the industry that we serve. And when one builds authority and trust, and I hate this word, but one becomes an influencer. And I'm not talking about a Kardashian TikTok influencer. I'm talking about an authority-based influencer. And the industry has gotten to know me very well, that when I'm on the lectern or writing a paper or a book or hosting a podcast or a webinar, they know they can come in and not be sold to. And educated people make educated choices. And that instantly changed the type of customer who would call us. Originally, with our old advertising strategies, the phone would ring, and the first question was, how much is your machine? And how much better can you do? And now it's, we have a problem, and I saw your talk, or I saw your webinar, or read your paper, or whatever, and it seems like you get the problem. What solutions do you recommend specifically that you can offer? I mean, they come to us with a problem seeking a solution, and they partner with us. And when we sell them machine, and like the 20th question is, oh, by the way, how much does it cost? They don't lead with price, and they don't demand discounts, and they work with us. They take care of their equipment. They maintain their equipment. They actually read the manuals. They actually do their maintenance. It's amazing the difference of quality of customer we attracted by simply tweaking the message that we put out. And in the chemical world, there's something called the Hansen's Law of Solubility. And what that is described as is like attracts like. Well, I think even outside of the chemistry world, like attracts like. So Malaya, you attracted Mac attracted Malaya. You attracted each other because of who you are. And I think that if you behave a certain way, you will attract people who behave that way as well. And that could be good and that can be terrible. And in the early cases of my company, it was terrible. And we were tacky, so we attracted tacky customers. And when we just stopped all that nonsense and we just concentrated on providing value and education and let the chips lie where they may, right? The chips came toward us. And now it seems logical. But the first time my mentor suggested to me, Mike, if you want to sell more stuff, quit talking about your stuff. I'm like, what? That's crazy. What are you, insane? Of course I want to talk about my stuff, how great it is. And no one wants to hear that, Mike. Like, I want to say it. Yeah, okay, I get that, but no one wants to hear it. No one good really wants to hear it. So there's a time to talk about your stuff, but it's after the potential customer approaches you and asks questions. Up to that point, it's it doesn't land.
So when you stopped going to trade shows, I've got a little question I've been wanting to ask. You stopped going to trade shows. How did you keep enough revenue coming in to keep making payroll and keep your business operating? Because I imagine initially, at least, you took a huge sales hit.
One would think. I thought we were prepared for that. Not one drop, not one measurable drop. In fact, sales started climbing at a faster rate than they did before. And it turned out that all the hype we were putting out were not driving us. We would have gotten some of that anyway, but what they were driving is the type of people that came to us. When we switched over to an education model and stopped exhibiting at shows, we attracted some attention because we were known to be, the greatest carnival barkers on any trade show floor. And so that created some industry chatter, mostly from our competitors, putting out, their hypothesis on why we did that. Oh, they must be going out of business or something. But sales did not drop. Now, part of it could be we had some momentum. And if you just if you start advertising tomorrow, that's not going to yield you a bunch of sales. It's a constant thing. You got to do it for time. And if you just stop tomorrow after turning that flywheel, getting it going, it's going to spin for some time. So we probably coattailed off of some momentum that we had built over many years. And, but when we immediately substituted that amount of energy with a more positive energy, education, I think that started providing energy to that flywheel, and it started turning it faster. And the most important thing is it started attracting a higher quality clientele. And that was the major thing that I've learned. And then there's a whole bunch of like business things, standard operating procedures and, prudent financial planning, all that stuff. It's boring to me, but necessary. But I got great people who understand and do that. But I certainly the biggest change, I think what saved our company ultimately, either from going out of business or just from being mediocre in a level of non-spectacularity, was the change to our marketing model, which is education-based.
Okay. So do you think if you were to start from the beginning, I'm curious, if you would use an education model, do you think it would have worked out still? Or do you think that you do have to start off with some kind of marketing, some kind of advertising budget just to get your name out there and get people knowing what you're doing?
A little bit of both. I think that sometimes the trade show people accuse me of knocking trade shows, and I'm not knocking trade shows. They're necessary. They're the only time when you can actually kick the tires and talk to the people, in real time. However, they're less necessary, I'd say, today, because when I started my business, there was no internet in 1992, right? And the only way to get a person to see a machine is to have them come to a trade show or meet them at a customer site that already has one. That was it. And then if we sent a brochure, there was no email back in 1992, so we would have to mail brochures or FedEx them or something. And that was it. And then fax came along, and then we could fax a quote, but that's, what does that do? So I do think today, if you're a new business and you're not known in your industry, certainly do a trade show. But I think you can get both. I think you can have an education model employed into traditional mediums. So if you're going to be at a trade show, skip the carnival act, keep the clowns, at the circus, don't bring them into your booth, and you can still educate. You can totally still educate within the booth. But everything that one does, even on day one, should be to provide value. And, one has to question what's valuable. If I just created the best new Sharpie in the world, do I just want to talk about how great my Sharpie is, or do I need to educate? Like, what's wrong with the current Sharpie? What's missing? What are the downsides to the design? Whatever. Let people identify with that, and then suggest an alternative technology that would hit all those pain points that may be associated with a Sharpie. So I think you can do it, but certainly at the early stage of the business, one needs to announce their arrival on the scene. And fortunately, today it's a whole lot easier, way easier, and way less costly than it was when I started. When I first started, one full page ad in a trade magazine was $6,000. There was no internet. Today, I have a website like Apple has a website, like Microsoft has a website, like Ford and Jaguar and all, they all have. I have the same potential reach as they do. It's a much more level playing field. And so one just has to be aware of, what are they using that playing field for? Are they using it to run crappy ads and braggadocious, claims? Or are they using it to provide value and start earning a reputation for being a safe source of accurate, non-commercial information, and trust the process that they will come to you? Nike shoes. When's the last time you saw an ad that talked about the arch support or the quality of the soles or the sewing or even the design of a Nike shoe? Never. They celebrate athleticism. And, sometimes their ads don't even show their shoe. It's implied. Coca-Cola, they have polar bears and Santa. They don't talk about the caramel flavor and all of that. They just say refreshing. No description of what it tastes like. And Patagonia, same way. Apple, although they've changed, their marketing strategy, I think, for the worst. They started, getting into way too many specs that anyone cares about. But in the earlier days of Apple, it was all about think different, be creative. They didn't talk about their processing power and how much RAM they have. And, now they go way down a rabbit hole that no one really cares about except a few, Apple geeks. But that, I think, can build value from day one.
So if you were a newer entrepreneur and you were trying to avoid just talking about your product constantly, how would you start? Would you start more emotional advertising, like, say, Nike or Coke, or do you go more down the path that you've gone with information, or do you think it is a mix of both? Like, what are your thoughts?
So you guys have a company. What does your company do?
The main one, when we first started, we do mole removal. It's called the Mole Busters. We go around in a couple counties up in Washington State. We catch people's moles. That's the first business I started.
Okay, let's just go with that. You're the first mole catcher I've ever spoken to. So
Really?
check that off my list here. I would, instead of talking about how great you are at capturing moles, I would start with the damage moles do. This is when you have a mole. It leaves a certain, brown streak on your lawn or whatever. This is what the diseases moles can spread. I don't know if they can, but let's just assume that. And if left untreated, this is what your lawn could look like, or your garden can look like if left untreated. And there are best practice ways to remove moles or mitigate moles. One can be with dynamite. One could be with cyanide. One could be with gas. One could be with something. Here are the environmentally sound methods. Pet safe. Answer all the questions. Overcome the objections. Not for your service, but in general, educate people on best practices. If you told me all those things, and I thought I had a mole problem or gopher problem or whatever, I would go, these people know what they're talking about. I'm going to go with them. And you never even have to have a call for action. That's implied. You educate someone, they will come to you. And they will not only come to you, they will recommend you. People today don't just buy from companies. Many people today, particularly we talked earlier about generational differences, younger generations tend to join tribes, not just buy from a company. And when I say join a tribe, how many times have you gone in front of an Apple store 3 days before the latest iPhone is released, which is like 2 megapixels better than the last year's model, right? There are people camping in tents outside the store so they could be the first 100 people to get one.
It's
Rather than
incredible.
just wait a week and get one for free. They'll wear Apple logos, Apple hats. They'll put Apple stickers on the back of their car. Nike, same way. Patagonia, same way. They join tribes and they wear the merch and they promote the brand. Why? Because they feel connected. So, if I had a mole issue and I learned the best practice ways to do it from you, I would call you first. And then if you did a great job, I would be, I don't think I'd wear a catch a mole t-shirt, but I would certainly, if someone said, I got this crazy thing in my backyard going on, I'm like, I got someone for you. I got a guy, I got a gal, they're going to take care of it. I would jump at the chance to recommend you. So that's how I would start. You can still start on day one with educating your customer base, your potential customer base, providing value. And, and the call for action is really just, hey, if you have any more questions, I'm here to answer your questions anytime. You don't have to say, call now. Operators are standing by. If you call in the next 10 minutes with this coupon code, we'll give you 20% off. I mean, that doesn't land unless I know you're the right solution. Because even if you wanted to do it for $1, I wouldn't let you if I didn't trust you, right? So I think you lead with value and trust the process will work. It cannot not work.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've noticed a lot of brands are doing that. I don't know if you follow like Alex Hormozy, for example. There's a lot of other guys like him. There's one I'm trying to remember the guy's name. It'll come to me later. But like Alex Hormozy, I don't know if you follow him, but he's constantly sharing advice. His goal is to acquire people's businesses.
Mm-hmm.
The other name I was thinking of is Dan Martell. Both of them, they're trying to invest in and acquire businesses. They go around, instead of talking about how they're going to acquire your business, they're talking about how you can grow your business more. They're talking about what you can do to make your business better. By doing that, people come to them and want them to take over their business. Shark Tank, people go to Shark Tank hoping that Mark Cuban will offer them a deal, hoping that Kevin O'Leary will offer them a deal. I think that's pretty in line with what you've been saying.
Yeah. You have to earn that trust. You have to earn that place. And then business comes. And the difference is you're not out there trying to catch them into something. You're not trying to dupe them into something. You're not out there with 1,000 hooks in the water, with lures on each one, trying to attract certain people. You're out there sending a message, providing value, whether they buy or not. And that will ensure that the only people you attract are people who agreed with your information. It landed with them. And it's not about, the cheapest price in town. If you're going to try and be cheaper, if there's 20 mole catchers in your town and you say, okay, I'm going to beat any advertised price, it's a race to the bottom. It's a race to zero. When I started my business at first, and I changed it quickly, unfortunately, I looked at the field and the potential competitors that we would have, and I figured out what their prices were, and I came out higher than all of them. I'm like, if we're going to lose on price, we're going to lose, we're going to fail fast. We're going to lose right away. I'm not interested in being the cheapest. I'm interested in being the best. And then, of course, all these fear-based decisions came in, and I changed all that. Those days are gone. Now we're back to We don't discount, not because we're arrogant, but because we built a price that we thought was fair that would allow us to continue to grow and be here in 10 or 20 years so we can continue to service what we sell. That is a service to the customer. It's not greed on our part. It's like we can't lose money on a sale. We cannot. We just prefer not to do the sale than to lose money on the sale or make our proper margins, because that will just jeopardize not just our ability to service our customers who invested in us, but also all the employees we have that are making house payments and sending their kids to school and putting braces on their teeth and clothing them and feeding them. It jeopardizes them as well. And I think business owners have a responsibility to their customers, to their vendors, to their team, to make prudent decisions and not gamble with their children's college money.
I like that. I really like your philosophy there. I feel like there's just so many business owners that go around like making these fear-based decisions like you brought up. Like when I started my first business, pretty quickly, I was like, no one's buying, let's lower the prices, lower the prices, lower the prices. And then eventually at the start of this year, I came around and started raising them. And the thing I've noticed now is my competitors, every time I raise my price, they raise theirs too.
Yeah, they're like, "Woof, good. Now we can raise ours." Yeah, exactly. It's never about price, and I say that. I mean, obviously, to some people, it's all about price, but for the most part, it's never about the price. It's about the value, and the perceived value, and the real value, and you have to make sure those two line up. But really, if someone has a need for something, whether it's a pair of jeans or glasses or a computer or catching rodents in the backyard, they need it. And do you really want the cheapest price, or do you want the best results? Someone that might be cheaper might have to come back 12 times and be cheaper 12 times, whereas someone who pays for a good service, a reasonable price for a good service, you might only have to go out there once or twice or whatever. I mean, I'm not familiar. I'm just totally winging it when it comes to rodent control because I know nothing about it. But I mean, I think certain things apply to pretty much all businesses. And if you're going to lose on price, lose on price. Just get it out of the way and thank the customer for showing their cards up front because they saved you a non-profitable deal. And let them go to. Sometimes the best thing you can do is the Trojan horse approach. I'll send toxic customers, or what I perceive as toxic customers, to my competitor. It's like a Trojan horse, right? They're going to go in, they're going to eat the competitor from the inside out. And I'm not trying to hurt my competitor, but I would rather they hurt my competitor than me, right? So anyway,
Yeah,
that's
imagine
probably
that
a
also
little
gets
bit of the
some
old me
goodwill.
coming out here. Yeah, exactly.
I like that. So I think we're running low on time. I have one last question I wanted to ask you for the podcast. If you were to start from ground zero again, what advice would you give yourself way back in the beginning?
Don't beat yourself up. I spent a lot of years really critiquing myself about the mistakes I've made. And I had a lot of self-judgment, and because I made some pretty gnarly mistakes, right? Epic. But looking back, they were necessary, and I'm grateful for them. That's one thing. Concentrate on sound decision making, not on one goal. And here's one thing: I learn things before I realize I learned things, and then I forget it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I learned this a long time ago. I used to fly airplanes. I have a pilot's license, and when I was training to be a pilot, my instructor, all pilots will say this, by the way. If you have any pilots watching or listening, they're going to go, oh yeah, I know that. There's 3 rules in the cockpit of every pilot: aviate, navigate, communicate. There's a lot of things one has to do on the flight deck. But at all times, you must simultaneously aviate, navigate, and communicate. Concentrate on any one of those things at the expense of the other, the plane hits a mountain or the ground or something terrible happens. Have to do all 3 at the same time. And that philosophy can be applied to business. If you concentrate on one problem, other things will go wrong. And then you have to concentrate on that other thing, and then other things will go wrong. It's the whack-a-mole, which is a great example for you, because that's what you do. You're professional whack-a-moles, right? So aviate, navigate, communicate, whatever that means in your business. Work on your business, work in your business, work on your business. Eventually, you want to work on your business and less in your business, but that takes time. That's just a question of scale. In the beginning, you're going to work in and on, probably more in than on, but don't forget the on. That would be the advice I would give myself, is be kind to yourself. Know that it's curriculum for a course you don't remember signing up for. And it's a learning experience. And one will learn from those mistakes. I would much rather hire someone who has failed in a business than someone who has had 3 successful businesses in a row. Because one doesn't always learn from success. I could sit at a roulette table for 4 hours, theoretically, and win every game. But roulette is a game of chance. Does that mean I'm good at roulette or I'm lucky? That tells me nothing. And I don't know if their businesses were successful because of them or in spite of them. However, someone who's made a mistake and, God forbid, lost a business, they won't do that again. They've learned something. And I would rather work with someone that has failure in their experience. Again, there's exceptions to that, obviously. There's some people that they fail at everything forever. But that's not the norm. Most people, most human beings learn from failure. Now, in my case, I had to fail a few times before it would sink in, because my ego would kind of get in the way. It was always some other person's fault or some other factor, not mine. But I just be grateful for that and listen to others, but listen to your gut. I think humans instinctively have a gut that tells them things. Women more than men. I think women have a very maternalistic instinct, and they can see things. My wife is always right for all the wrong reasons. It drives me crazy. We look at the same set of facts, and she comes up with this conclusion. I'm like, what? That makes no sense to me. And then it turns out she was right, because she's seen something differently than I'm seeing it. And we all look through different lenses. And trust your gut. And one last thing. Take fear off the table. Don't make fear-based decisions. If you recognize that you're doing something because you're afraid of the consequences of not doing it, put it on pause. Just put it on pause for a few days and consider the possibilities and make peace with the worst. What's the worst that can happen? Well, it won't kill you, more than likely. It might kill your business. That's not good. But make peace with the worst. Okay, what happens if we don't get this order from this company? If we don't discount our prices and get the order, that'll go to our competitor. Yeah, we lose a little market share. Okay, well, I'm willing to do that. Just make peace with the worst. And then you don't make deals with the devil to avoid what you think is the worst, because chances are you'll get over the worst. It'll just be one more hurdle.
Well, thank you so much today for sharing, Mike. I enjoyed hearing about avoiding fear-based decisions. I know those can really screw a business. It was great learning from you about marketing in ways where you're giving instead of just talking about yourself and bragging. It was great to hear about. It was great sharing about your journey in general. Malia, do you have anything else to add? Oh, what was that, Mike?
No, it was great talking to you guys. I'm glad you guys are doing the show.
Thank you, Mike. This is going to be our, I think, 4th episode. Yep. Is that correct, Malia?
Well, good for you. Now, what's making you do this? If we're not completely out of time.
I want to help get more information out to young entrepreneurs that are starting out in their journeys. She's 20, I'm 21. We've got a couple businesses that we've started together. The main venture that we've been running is the Mole Busters. I just wrote my first book recently, and we're going to be launching it in November. It's all about how I went from being a broke cyclist. I've been living in Europe. I came home with $6,000 in credit card debt, and I was working minimum wage. It's just about the journey of how I had to adapt step after step to go from there to where I'm at, owning multiple businesses with my wife and continuing to grow from there.
That's amazing. You guys are impressive, both of you.
Thank you so much, Mike. That's a huge compliment coming from somebody of your stature.
Well, you earned it. I mean, that's, it took me a lot of years to get to what you're doing now. So you started earlier. You'll make some mistakes, but I think that the fact that you're doing this podcast, which has nothing to do with Mole Busters, or any other of your businesses, you're not hyping anything. I think it's a credit to you, and that helps build the authority, even though it's nothing to do with your business, right? You're providing value, and I think all of that is. Forgive me if I go a little bit over, but let me just use this analogy. I'm an analogy king. My family makes fun of me all the time. Back in the old days, you used to live in Europe. I've been going to Europe since I was a baby. My parents immigrated from there. And I remember we were in Poland going on a train, and it was a steam train, not a novelty steam train. Those were the trains they were running back then. This was in the 70s. And, steam trains have basically two employees up front: the engineer who drives the train and the fireman who shoves coal into the furnace, right? So coal goes into the furnace, generates heat. Heat boils the water. Water turns to steam. Steam takes the train down the track. Everything one does in marketing is the equivalent of shoving coal into the furnace to generate energy, to boil the water, to turn to steam, to move the train down the track. So this podcast that you're doing, and the ones I do, is like a lump of coal. The webinars that we do is more coal. The trade shows that we attend are more is more coal. The conferences that I speak at, more coal. I don't know which lump of coal took us from mile 1 to mile 2. All I know is that we need energy in the furnace to create the energy for the train to move down the track, or the business to move down the track. And anything one does to generate that energy is an efficient use of moving your business down the track. Braggadocious stuff is cheap coal. It doesn't burn hot. It doesn't burn long, and it's not very efficient. It will move the train down the track, but very inefficiently. Quality coal, quality energy, which is all these things that we've been talking about, in my opinion, is a very efficient way to generate the energy required to grow your business. So there's my dorky analogy.
I think that analogy you just shared with us is probably the best part of the podcast so far. I really appreciate it. I like that. I feel like if you can break an idea down into an analogy, it's probably one of the most effective ways to communicate something to somebody. We can all picture the coal burning to boil the water in a steam train. It's harder to look at that with marketing and be able to visualize that in your head.
Right.
What I've noticed with the greatest speakers and writers I've read or listened to, they're great with analogies. I think that's all for the show, unless Malia has anything else to add.
Well, just be conscious of your time, Mike. There was like one question I think that we didn't really hit on. We hit on most of them,
Sure.
not explicitly, but the last two we have on here is the role of humility and growth in entrepreneurship, which we touched on a little bit. And then we'd love to have some insights just from writing The Reluctant Entrepreneur. What really went into that book?
Well, regarding humility, when I said I came in with a lot of ego, which is probably the opposite of humility, I had to put the ego in the dungeon. And I think when you get to the point where you don't know something, that is the first sign of humility. My goal today is to be the least informed person. I won't say stupid, but the least informed person in the room. That's humility. The quest for knowledge. I'm 65. I have a insatiable quest for knowledge to this day, always have. I think that is an exercise in humility, right? Because if I was not humble, I would think I already know it all. And I think that one always needs to keep learning and keep discovering and challenge your uh, preconceived notions of how things work. If something sounds a little crazy, consider the possibilities. Instead of just rejecting it, stick it on a shelf in your head and say, okay, this is nuts, but I'm not going to reject it. I'm just going to consider the possibilities, because I guarantee you every single time I've been given advice that I just immediately deemed as crazy from someone I trust, obviously. Um, I'll consider the possibility, and several months, sometimes several years later, it makes perfect sense. I just needed more context. I needed more experience to all of a sudden see that crazy idea in a different light. So that's my take on humility. It's hard to do when you first start a business, because anyone who thinks they can just start a business out of nothing is probably not quite humble enough, which is good, which is great. No criticism there. You need that little bit of ego and bravado and passion and against all odds kind of thing. You need the no pressure, no diamonds, no guts, no glory, no risk, no reward mentality. That will kill your business over time, but it's valuable on day one. Regarding the book, I do a lot of speaking at universities to graduating engineering students on the subject of entrepreneurship, because a lot of engineers will end up, designing something and becoming a business owner. So I speak to them, and as I started doing that more and more, I started remembering more stories and more granular details, because I've forgotten most of it. And as I started remembering it, I would literally just start making bullet point notes, like, oh yeah, tell this story, tell this anecdote, whatever. And then at some point, I enjoyed that because I started remembering all these things that I had forgotten. And I thought, I'm going to start writing this down, almost like a diary. But I thought, I'm going to write a book, but I had no intent to publish it. And it took a few years. It's not a big book, but it took a few years, because I'd write it for, a few weeks. I'd be on fire and I'd write it, and then I'd stick it on a shelf, and maybe 6 months later, pull it off and read it again and go, oh, this part's great. This part sucks, and I'd rewrite it. And I did that for a few years, gave it to some friends to read, and they're like, hey, yeah, this is good. You should publish it. And then eventually I hit the publish key and published it. But I wrote it. I mean, it sells, obviously, but I didn't write it to make any money. I wrote it really to help entrepreneurs realize they are not alone, and they are not as unique as they think they are, and they're and to stop judging themselves, and to maybe just share every mistake I've ever made. The book is not a how-to book; it's a how not to book. It is. If you avoid all the mistakes I've made, you have a better shot at business than I did. And why go through all that? And I say that a little disingenuously, because I think you do have to go through all that. But at least I give them a preview, and hopefully the feeling like, oh my God, him too? I thought it was just me, right? And I thought I was at fault. Yeah, you probably are, but you're supposed to be at that time in the business. So it's really to realize, to help entrepreneurs realize they're not alone. There's many other people going through the exact same process, the same but different. I'm sure there's certain unique things in the mole catching business that are, different than making shoes, but the principles of the challenges are exactly the same. And, big companies fail every day. Small companies fail every day. It's not because you're small. It's not because you're big. It's because you're making the same mistakes that all companies of any size have made, just at a smaller or larger scale.
I love that. The more I live, the more I realize that, like you're saying, we're not really that unique at all. We're all going through the same thing, just we're at different stages of going through it.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, there's certain unique aspects of different types of businesses, but the general principles that can make a business fail or succeed, I think, are universal.
Yes. Thank
Thanks for
you for
sharing
all
with
these.
us, Mike.
Well, thanks for having me on your show, and I wish you continued success. I'll I'll start following the show on your YouTube channel, and I'm looking forward to seeing more episodes.
Thanks, Mike. Is there any links that you'd like us to be putting up in the videos or anywhere that we can share with our viewers?
Yeah, and I'll email these to you afterwards so you have them. But MikeConrad.com, that's Conrad with a K, not a C. MikeConrad.com is my personal page. ReluctantEntrepreneurPodcast.com is my entrepreneur podcast page. And for your technical geeks in your audience that want to learn about reliability in the electronics business, and they're going to go down some deep technical rabbit holes. That's reliabilitymatters.com. And all of both those podcasts are available on our YouTube channels with the same name as the podcast, and on all the usual suspect podcast sites.
Perfect.
Okay,
I
awesome.
appreciate it, Mike.